So many things that I like about him. And then Dusty told me this morning he went around and learned everyone's name on the entire security staff, everyone in the building. Just a really great guy, and he seems to be handling the moment very well. Nick, is anyone beating the Ravens in the AFC?
The Ravens right now are the best team in football. This is, I don't think anyone would object to that. They're on an 11-game winning streak. If you like I love Football Outsiders. They have really smart, albeit nerdy stats. DVOA says this is one of the top 10 teams through 15 games of the last 30 years. That this is a few spots behind the undefeated Patriots. The number one team on that list is the 91 Washington team. That this is right now a team that is playing like an all-time team. Is anyone beating them? I think Kansas City's got the best shot of anybody. Kansas City was my pick before the year, and Kansas City right now is playing its best football of the season, bar none. The Ravens' defense the last 3 months, 2.5 months, has been exceptional. The Chiefs' defense the last 5 weeks have been the best defense in football, and they still have that guy right there. And I do wonder, to me, there are 3 legitimate questions for Baltimore. One is, after last week's game, health. Was Mark Ingram, was that a cramp, or is that a real calf strain?
He's an MRI, I think, today.
MRI today. He is a critical component to their offense. Another Mark Andrews got banged up, and then we saw Lamar popped right up, but Lamar took a big shot.
That was a big hit.
So one question is health. The other question is, how much will the layoff hurt them? I'm sure Baltimore wish they could just keep playing. They've won 11 games in a row. They haven't really even, aside from the San Francisco game, been tested into the fourth quarter in most of these games. They now have a Week 17 game. We don't know who's going to play, but we know they know doesn't matter. Then they have a week off. Then they're going to be playing a team, whomever it is, that just won a playoff game and seemingly is feeling good about themselves. And the last question, and this one is not because it's Lamar. It would be this case for any young quarterback that either has no playoff experience or their only playoff experience is bad, which is, how will Lamar do in the postseason? Those are, to me, 3 real questions. The Chiefs, on the other hand, right now are the healthiest they've been all year. They are the hottest they've been all year to go along with Baltimore, but they obviously are going to have to keep going, keep playing, because their seeding's not yet settled, and they could get the bye. And we know Patrick Mahomes can perform in the playoffs. For all those reasons, the Chiefs are still my pick, taking nothing away from Baltimore. I think Baltimore will probably be a 4-point favorite in the AFC Championship game at home, and they've earned that given what they've done this season.
Look, it's easy to make the case for Baltimore. I mean, among the things you mentioned, but also John Harbaugh. He is a proven Super Bowl champion coach.
It's a great point.
Andy Reid, I like Andy Reid, but a lot of people think he's the Mike D'Antoni of the NFL. He has not gotten it done in the postseason. He has been to the Super Bowl, but obviously hasn't won it. So that is a question mark, but I do think you can make a case for the Chiefs. Another question with Jackson that you didn't bring up, or Baltimore in general. What if they get behind? Okay, now they were behind the Cleveland yesterday, and as you 6-0, but as you said, Cleveland made some dumb mistakes and play calls and stuff, time management at the end of the first half. Kansas City won't do that. Kansas City is also that team that can put them in a hole, can put them in a 13-0 hole, a 21-7 hole, something like that with their offense. So if they get behind, obviously you've got to start throwing the ball. And as well as Lamar has thrown it, he's been throwing it with the threat of the run. When you know you've got to pass because they're behind and time is short, how is he going to respond? You talked last week about they still don't get their receivers involved too much.
Nope.
It's mainly the running backs and the tight ends. And so that's another thing that Kansas City, with their new defense playing well. As you mentioned, great against the pass, tops in the league against the pass lately. They're also 7-1 on the road. So this is a team that can travel. So I do think there's a good argument to be made that Kansas City can prevail.
Let me add one other thing for Baltimore, because even if you're watching right now and you're like, I don't believe in the Chiefs are going to lose to the Titans, the Ravens are going to coast this. Whomever comes out of the AFC is going to be in for a monster opponent in the Super Bowl. Right now in the NFL, of the 6 best teams in football, 4 of them play in the NFC. One of them's playing tonight. We saw one of them yesterday with a big comeback against the Titans in New Orleans. Seattle obviously fell on its face a bit. San Francisco with a big comeback against the Rams. So whomever comes out of the AFC is going to face what I think is the best team of the superior conference in the Super Bowl, whether that's Baltimore or Kansas City.
But I definitely think of those 2 teams, and I'll even throw in New England as a 3rd team, I think those 3 teams can play with whoever comes out of the NFC.
Nick, is there anything at this point that Jason Garrett can do to save his job?
No. And
even if they win and they get into the playoffs?
I refused last week to engage in the fantasy that Dallas was all of a sudden going to go on some magical run, that after being one team through 13 weeks, because they played a good game in their 14th game, that was then going to be their 15th game, their 16th game, and on some playoff. No. And I'm going to listen, there's a fair amount of stuff on this show that I predict or I say, and it turns out I'm wrong about. This is not one of them. I said after the Patriot game, you fire that head coach. And the answer was no, you can't. It's a short week. And then when they get crushed by Buffalo on Thanksgiving at home, I said, no, it's not a short week anymore. You fire the head coach. No, we can't. And then they get crushed by the Bears. And now you have a long week. And I said, you fire the head coach. And I'm just curious, if at any point they had done that, would they be in a worse position than they are now? Of course not. Because this team was 3-0. They've lost 8 of 12. They were 5-3 at the midway point. What are they now? They're 7-9. We can do that math. They are 7-8. Pardon me. 7-9 is maybe a little bit of a projection. There is to me no argument to be had that Jason Garrett should retain this job. And in my eyes, there is no possibility that they make the Super Bowl, which is at this point the only way he could retain his job.
I think, obviously, like you said, it would take a football miracle. They get in, they beat Washington, the Eagles lose, which I'm not convinced the Eagles will win that game. I'm going to be honest. Now, I'm not going to go all the way with the miracle and say they get in the playoffs, then they win 2 games and get to the conference championship, which might be enough in Jerry Jones's eyes to save his job. It wouldn't be enough in my eyes. In my eyes, he would have to get to the Super Bowl to save his job. Okay, but in Jerry's eyes, maybe if they get to the conference championship. But I think the playoffs is possible just because I'm not convinced that Philadelphia is that good. Philadelphia was riding, obviously you're hyped up for that game yesterday. In addition to all that was at stake, it is a rivalry, and they hadn't beaten Dallas in a while, especially with Zeke and Dak playing. So they go into there, they're on an emotional high, they get the win. I wouldn't be shocked to see a letdown, especially with the Giants, coming off a big win and maybe thinking Daniel Jones is special. But even if they get in, that's not enough. Look, I think they've had plenty of opportunities to fire him before, and nobody could have said anything. His first 3 years, they were 8-8. You mentioned Tony Romo earlier. Tony Romo played all but one of those games in his first 3 years, and they went 8-8. He's been there 9 full seasons now, 3 winning records, 3 times if they don't make these playoffs, 3 times out of 9 you're in the playoffs and you're retaining your job? No.
And losing enormous games at the end of the regular season has happened more often than not. 2011, 2012, 2013, you lose in Week 17. Week 17 to miss the playoffs. 2 years ago, the first game after Zeke's suspension. Remember that? When they have an opportunity after winning the last 3 games of Zeke's suspension to get into the playoff picture. You lose a critical game to Seattle, and this year in Week 16, you lose this game to Philadelphia. And I want to just go back quickly to that final offensive play. It's 4th and 8. Amari Cooper says he's not winded in the postgame commentary. They just have the regular rotation of guys. I know Jason Garrett is not your de facto play caller anymore. That's Kellen Moore. The head coach of that football team in that spot with your season on the line, if he sees on the field is Jason Witten, Blake Jarwin, Tavon Austin, Michael Gallup, you got 3 timeouts. You don't need them if you don't get the first down anyway. The game's over. You make sure your best players are on the field. You make sure Randall Cobb and Amari Cooper are on the field in a spot like that, and they didn't do it.
Nick, honestly, it felt like they had benched Cooper. Because there were several times in critical situations that he wasn't on the field, even before that. Now, so Cooper, as bad as it was, to your point, that didn't surprise me as much as Cobb. Cobb had just had a big catch, and he's obviously a good possession receiver. The fact that he wasn't on the field either is just ridiculous.
All that, plus the fact that Ezekiel Elliott was limited after what he did last week, after the money you paid him coming into the season, after the fact that you were going to essentially be a running team because he's your best player, even though Kellen Moore had 3 great opening weeks with Dak Prescott. It just seems like this all falls on the head coach at some point, probably soon. All right. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.